Hello and welcome to another Overlord lore video, and today we are going to take a look at what would, or rather what could happen if Ainz Ooal Gown encounters another guild. But before we are doing so, let me thank my Patreons for supporting this channel. Now, first and foremost, the scenario and condition in which both met would likely be determined by whether or not both would be hostile to one another. For example, Ainz himself said that if he isn't the only player transported to the new world, then those who were transported would eventually gather, and he, as a Japanese guy, assumes that other Japanese nationals would seek out one another and form one large group. If this happens, Ainz would want to be part of this alliance. So this illustrates that Ainz isn't opposed to any alliance or group that isn't dominated by the Great Tomb's might and influence. I mean, he tried to be peaceful and negotiate with Jerknith and his empire. It's the NPCs that made the problems. But if a real, actual guild appears, then Ainz might be inclined to ignore the NPC's advice just this one time. So therefore Ainz would be very open for everything, and albeit because they are programmed to do so, and because they will suspect a bigger plan behind all of this, the NPCs of the Great Tomb will follow the decision without hesitation to the letter, which means the relationship both guilds will have is highly dependent on the stance of the other party, which leads us to the following hostile scenario. Another guild is transported to the other side of the continent, and it is conquering the respective region, just as the tomb annexes theirs. Eventually, they are drawn to the center of the continent due to the powerful nations vying for control, and therefore both would eventually meet. Then some old relationship issues would likely break open. The other guild likely isn't used to dealing with others as equals, but as inferiors. Now, for decades, they are used to conquer and rule, not to make concessions and negotiate. And on a more personal level, both NPCs and eventually ruling players will likely hold the Great Tomb in contempt. This will happen for two major reasons. Number one, heteromorphs in general and the Great Tomb of Nazarick in particular were disliked to a great degree, with the Great Tomb being known as a PKing guild. Fear and dread might also play a role in this decision-making process. And heteromorphs were hunted down and killed by humanoid players who were the majority, hence why the guild, the enemy hostile guild, is most likely humanoid as well. And the other part will be hybris, being a conqueror with no equal, likely for several decades, might have dulled the intuition and the battle skills of the players. These factors and these habits will then likely lead to an ill-planned declaration of war, fueled by fear and hybris, with the aim of wiping out Ainz Ooal Gown by using the power of the already conquered New World nations in addition to their very own, in order to win the war. The players themselves would likely be reluctant to fight against the Great Tomb though, and they will remain so far in the back of the front that they might as well not leave their own guild base in the first place. In order to locate and secure any and all gold coins and valuable materials, in order to facilitate resurrection rituals to replenish their numbers, they will then labor inside of their protected guild base instead of venturing out and risking death and level loss. And in the initial and longest first phase of the war, the Great Tomb of Nazarick will likely be very defensive, since this is what the guild base itself is all about, and more importantly, what the guild is trained and familiar with. Thus Ainz Ooal Gown will wage a war of attrition, and employing strategies like scorched earth, thus making any advances costly. After all, it takes decades to grow a forest, but only days to burn it down. This cruelty is something that Ainz Ooal Gown is perfectly suited for, since he has no empathy and pity for those outside of the guild, unless they manage to ingratiate themselves to the Great Tomb in some sort of way. The other guild will likely be made up of humans, and confronted with horrific war stories every single day, they might lead to tiredness, conflict, and discontent will grow within the enemy guild, especially if more than just one player is transported. As Bobby B in his beautiful song "What is the Greater Number, 5 or 1" has put it, one king behind one army, a real army with one purpose, is likely going to crush 7 kingdoms led by individuals of roughly the same strength if they can't unify. This isn't to say that the humanoid guild doesn't want to try to take advantage of this war weariness. They might try to appeal to the selfishness of the Sorcerer Kingdom's inhabitants by promising them better living conditions, like a home, a warm meal every now and then, and a relatively good and solid rule of law, which won't do a single thing, since by this point Project Utopia would lead the denizens of the Sorcerer Kingdom to become rather wealthy and therefore rather enraged, seeing how the invading forces are responsible for the destruction of their recently purchased property. Furthermore, Nea's religion will likely have turned a good portion of them into zealots, and bribing a person with worldly possession is a fruitless endeavor if they can't offer the chance of spiritual fulfillment that only headpads by Ainz or one of his Pleiades battlemates can provide. Additionally, their own subjugated nations of the enemy humanoid guild will also tire of the cruel grinding warfare, especially because they don't get to be revived most of the time, while the many undead of Ainz Ooal Gown wouldn't even know the feeling of doubt, tiredness, hunger, or cold, which will make the entire enemy alliance very, very happy once a trusted NPC leader brings great news from the front line. After fighting in the mountainous regions of the Dragon Kingdom without any real progress for months on end, the Great Tomb, either due to a lack of numbers or a lack of attention, left itself wide open. The mountains could be held with only 20% of the numbers for a short time, meaning that 80% of the enemy force could cross into the undefended region between the slain theocracy and the Dragon Kingdom. Furthermore, they could take the path between Irantel and the undeads of the Cuts Plain in order to attack the Great Tomb directly, and this plan will work surprisingly well, since Ainz not only expected that move, but used the downfall of Castle and Country, the world item of the former theocracy, in order to mind control one of the enemy's leader, in order to trick the players into attacking the Great Tomb. What follows is a massacre. The undeads of the plain and the troops stationed at Irantel destroy any chance of retreat, while the guild's defense system, especially the 8th floor, combining Victim and Rubedo into one decisive attack, will destroy the invading army with relatively light losses by comparison. After that, Ainz immediately launches an all-out counterattack before news of the defeat can reach the other guild base, while Fluder Paradane, by that time an incredible powerful overlord in his own right, will block out communications. Like a Tyranid High Fleet, the Great Tomb will use Oriol's Omegas or rather Shaltier's world item, or alternatively a couple of gate spells, in order to teleport a huge part of Nazarick's force, with Rubedo as the spearhead, onto the doorstep of the other guild, which the mind control NPC will unlock, either by actually unlocking a door, or by misdirecting the enemy forces. Surprised, confused, and deprived of troops, the humanoid guild will likely fall within hours, with the mind-controlled minion detailing what kind of world item the enemy guild has. Ainz Ooal Gown furthermore can use one of his own world items to counter it, which will lead at least to a draw in terms of world item battle, without any losses of world items from Ainz Ooal Gown's side. But if the enemy guild is blessed with 2 world items, or if they just found another during the conquest, like Ainz will have obtained downfall of castle and country from the smoldering ruin of the theocracy, then it could actually require one of the 20, the strongest and therefore one-time use world items, in order to undo the damage caused by it. But one way or another, Ainz Ooal Gown would win against the enemy guild. Without the world items, the enemy players will either be killed, but in case Ainz doesn't feel very nice, they will be transported to the Great Tomb, berated for the damage they have done, and then ultimately left to their fate, or rather to the mercy of the 5 worst. While their guild item will be broken, thus destroying the guild, ending the threat. Alternatively, Nefaria will receive yet another promotion to Master Brewer, and his Alchemist Guild will become a proper guild in the truest of senses. So much for the violent option, and next time we will explore a different one, namely that of peace and plenty. But for today, this is it. Thank you very much for watching, and special thanks to Almighty Dio, Bad Guy Yi, Ben C, Chrissy, Sia, Death is Mercy, Dystopia, Dystopia II, Feral Shivan, Guy with That Head, Hector Marino, Hoss, Huster, Jacob G, Jana B, Jason, Kratos, Chromius, Legendarius, Lelouch V. Britannia with a mustache, Lexus Fox, Lord Nishikian Rai, Lord Touch Me, Matthew, Mr. Schuss, Michael R, Michael Y, O'Kill, Paddy Pantom, Primus 11, Shadow Lightning Wolf, Shrine Keeper, Texas Deer, The Orc Warboss, Rock Ed Smasher, T.E. Wang, Vash Hawkeye, Venture Fanatic, Wave of Manga, Wilhelm, and Zonagon. Thanks guys. Anyway, have a nice day, and I hope to see you all again soon on my next video.